There we go. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the 39th Annual Charles Kegley Memorial Lecture. My name is Nate Olson. I serve as the director of the Kegley Institute of Ethics. We're going to start tonight's event with CSUB's land acknowledgement. We acknowledge with gratitude that the meeting place of California State University Bakersfield is the traditional territory of the Katahnamuk people of the Tohono tribe, a place their nation has called home since time immemorial. The land on which we gather today and its surrounding areas are still home to many indigenous communities. We're grateful for all the indigenous people who continue to care for and remain interconnected with this land. We promise to be conscientious stewards of this land for the future generations. Thank you. Next, I would like to invite to the stage CSUB's Vice President for Student Affairs and Strategic Enrollment Management, Dr. Dwayne Cantrell.
Thank you, Dr. Olson. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Oh, there you are. All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. On behalf of our president, Dr. Vernon B. Harper, Jr., I want to welcome all of the students and faculty and staff and community members to CSUB for the 39th Annual Charles W. Kegley Memorial Lecture. Charles Kegley was the founding chair and Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies here at CSUB. He was named Outstanding Professor in 1984 and later named member of the CSUB Faculty Hall of Fame. Can we give him a round of applause? Free speech is centrally important for our campus community. Without freedom to speak one's mind, we wouldn't be able to hear the wide range of perspectives that are central to a college education. Student Affairs and Strategic Enrollment Management, our division, is happy to be one of the sponsors for this evening's lecture as we recognize the centrality of this topic for our campus community. It is our honor at CSUB to host tonight's speaker, Pete Davis, who you'll hear more about in just a moment. His talk tonight, like his documentary Join or Die, which many of you have watched this afternoon, will address the importance of civic engagement for a healthy democracy. I'd also like to recognize our sponsors, Valley Strong Credit Union, Kegley family, including Dr. Jackie Kegley, who's right here in the front row. Thank you, Dr. Kegley. And she is here, and we're so grateful for all of the work that you've done in laying the foundation for this campus. Thank you very much. So I'll welcome back to the stage Dr. Olson. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Cantrell, and thank you for your support. As Dr. Cantrell mentioned, tonight's lecture is the 39th Charles W. Kegley Memorial Lecture. You've got a program. I hope you all got a program as you're coming in tonight. So there's more about Dr. Kegley, Dr. Charles Kegley, in that program, including about his view that the humanities really is here to illuminate real-world issues. So over the years, now 39 years of this lecture, we've brought speakers who do just that. So past speakers have included Angela Davis, Daniel Ellsberg, last year Paulo Ramos. I'm glad to have Pete Davis here tonight at CSUB to continue in that tradition. Before I bring up Pete, I want to repeat Dr. Cantrell's thanks to our event sponsors, the Kegley family. So Jackie's here as well as her grandson, Stephen, who's a CSUB student. So thank you to the Kegley family. Valley Strong Credit Union and the Division of Student Affairs and Strategic Enrollment Management. I also want to thank everyone else who's helping make tonight's event happen, including, as you saw coming in, our fantastic staff member for the Kegley Institute, Tricia Harmon. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you to our tech support staff making this happen in the back, as well as all the student volunteers who are all members of the Sensational Sophomores program here at CSUB. So let's give them all a round of applause. Okay, so after Pete's lecture and after he answers some questions from the audience, so I mean, that's one thing to keep in mind. Think about some questions as he's up here talking. We'll have a chance for you to ask questions. But after all of that, we're going to also have a book signing out in the lobby. So thank you to Russo's Books, who's here tonight with copies of Pete's book, Dedicated, The Case for Commitment in an Age of Infinite Browsing. If you're a CSUB student, you should have gotten a raffle ticket as you came in. We're going to raffle off a few of those copies, I think 5 of the copies of the book. So at the end, I'm going to find out who that is. I'll read names up here. If I forget to do that, let me know. I'll make sure I read them before we go out, and names of the people who've got a book. So, yeah, I want to say a few more words about Pete, a few more words of introduction. There's a detailed biography of him there in the program for tonight. But I think the first thing to say about Pete is that he's an advocate for community. He met with a senior seminar of political science students this afternoon, and we just had dinner and talk a bit about this and talk about all the ways that he's advocated for community in our country. His documentaries about that. I think first to say, tonight's talk about free speech and thinking about free speech, but it's really about the context for free speech, the kind of community that allows free speech to flourish. Pete gave quite a commencement speech at his graduation from Harvard Law School in 2018. It was so good, it struck such a nerve that it's been viewed over 30 million times online, and became the basis for this book, Dedicated, which he'll be signing after the lecture I mentioned. Dedicated is about the importance of dedicating yourself to something and the difficulty of doing so in our digital age. Pete's subsequent work, like the award-winning documentary Join or Die, shows that what's really important is dedicating yourself to a group of people, to a community. Pete will say more about Join or Die, but I'll close by noting that Pete doesn't restrict himself to writing, directing, and producing, which is plenty. He's also the co-founder of Democracy Policy Network, a policy organization focused on raising up ideas that deepen democracy. So please join me in welcoming Pete to the stage and to CSUB.
So much. Thank you so much. So appreciate it. It's been such a warm welcome here in Bakersfield. I'm so grateful to be here, and I'm so grateful you all came out today. I like to start my talks this year specifically by acknowledging that 2026 is the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country. It is the year when we are all going to finally learn that beautiful word, semi-quincentennial. You could practice with me, semi-quincentennial. That's what we are celebrating this year. But it's a strange anniversary for our country because no one is really in the mood for celebrating this year. Many people across the country, maybe most Americans, and especially young Americans, probably many of you in this room today, find it hard to feel festive this year. No matter your background, where you fall on the political spectrum, which part of the country you're from, there's a sense that we are living in dark times. I don't want to linger on a parade of horribles for too long, but honestly, this might be the only semi-quincentennial parade, a parade of horribles we can all agree on in this country. So here goes. The number of Americans who report having no friends has quadrupled since 1990. More than half of all young people report suffering from serious loneliness, and half of all American meals are eaten alone. The number of Americans who say that most people can be trusted has dropped from 80% in the mid-60s to 30% today, and net confidence in almost every American institution has declined. Surveys find that we trust the government less, we trust the president less, we trust Congress less, and we trust the Supreme Court less than we did decades ago. We trust the press, the media, and religion less. When polled on whether they trust a specific list of major institutions in American public life, not even a third of young people feel they can express a lot of confidence in banks, courts, tech, mayors, governors, the feds, the news, corporations, the medical, legal, and educational systems. So let's sit with the fact that it's no surprise that half of all Americans believe the overall system has failed them. And with this collapse in trust, we have become disconnected from almost all groupings larger than ourselves. About half of Americans are active in 0 organizations. Half of Americans participate in 0 organizations in their weekly, monthly, yearly lives. Among young people raised in a religious congregation, 6 in 10 have left. Half of all young people describe themselves as political independents, despite a substantial share of self-described independents consistently voting for one party or another, which means that these folks aren't in practice politically independent, but rather simply don't trust their party enough to be proud to say they are part of it. There was polling done in 1998 and 2023, so we have a 25-year trend over whether patriotism, religion, having children, community involvement, and money was very important to Americans. They asked, is this very important to you? Over the past quarter century, every single one of these values is significantly down, except, of course, money, which is one of the few things we are valuing more in the last 25 years. But even as we are hustling for that bag, only 1/3 of us feel engaged in our daily work. So that's the parade of horribles. I'll stop there. Our bonds have loosened, our trust has thinned, our sense of purpose has waned. And out of that, we have lost our ability to solve big public problems together, to bridge divides, to tackle crises, to build the future. This is not the semi-quincentennial we were hoping for. And for most of my lifetime, we have not been able to solve our big civic problems because we have been repeatedly told that some silver bullet was going to come solve our problems for us. But we saw what happened over the past decades with those silver bullets. The computer didn't solve these big public problems. And the fall of the Berlin Wall didn't solve these big public problems. The internet didn't solve them. Social media didn't solve them. The iPhone didn't solve them. The latest viral idea in some TED Talk or on the cover of a book in the airport did not solve these big public problems. Obama didn't solve these big public problems. And Trump is sure as hell not solving these big public problems. We've been through this silver bullet hype cycle way too many times to count. Something new is coming. It works wonders in some particular context, in some particular way. The story about it goes viral. We talk about it at cocktail parties. Politicians start saying, if you elect me, I'm going to take this new big idea national. Leaders across the country start saying, let's bring this idea I read about here to our town or our campus or our company. And then over the next decade, we start seeing mixed results. The silver bullet might not have been a total sham or a con. It just wasn't a silver bullet, because there's a lot of caveats, and the caveats start piling up. Well, the big idea works in some places, but not in others. It works when you have it go together with other things that support it. It works if you tinker with it to fit to the specific place, and if you don't do that, it doesn't work. It only works if you have buy-in from the community as a whole to the idea, or when the community as a whole really knows how to work or use the idea. It only works if you have some trusted, charismatic leader, implementing the idea, or if people trust each other enough to use it together. It usually boils down to, that silver bullet only works if it's the right vibe, and we don't really know what's going on with the right vibe. But by the time we have enough data to report on these mixed results and pile of caveats, we've moved on to the next silver bullet. This is where we find ourselves today. A bunch of public problems piling up, and a bunch of miracle cures and quick fixes and magic wands and trump cards and golden keys and silver bullets enchanting us, but ultimately failing to fix our big public problems. I was invited here to particularly talk about free speech, and this is the proper time to bring up free speech because in many ways, the idea of freeing more speech has been one of the biggest silver bullets that we thought might solve some of our problems. And I'm a huge fan of free speech. We should not give an inch on free speech, but it is true that the idea over the last 3 decades or so that we would free more speech would result in solving some of these problems was an idea in the air. And when I think about this, I like thinking about this movie that actually came out 50 years ago at the bicentennial. It was one of the biggest of movies of the year in 1976. It was a movie called Network. Has anyone seen the movie Network? Some of the older generation in the crowd has seen the movie Network. It's streaming now if anyone from my generation or younger wants to see the movie Network. Here's the big idea if you haven't seen the movie Network. The big idea of network was, what if a newscaster finally said what we've all been thinking? What if he said the truth about how the world is messed up? What if he got on the air and he shouted, does anyone remember his famous line from Network? "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." Network was a fantasy movie because it was considered fantastical in 1976 that someone on TV might say something so rebellious as the truth about how the world actually worked. It was also a fantasy movie because it was playing into a dream we had about how if only we were able to get the truth out there, we'd have the revolution we need and finally be able to solve these problems. This was a popular fantasy in the last quarter of the 20th century. This is what the Unabomber was dreaming of. If only I could get people to read my manifesto, then the world would change. That was his thinking. And of course, not all of us were going to such extreme lengths as the Unabomber to have our speech heard. But the fantasy of the truth finally being outed was in the air at the time. And that's the wish fulfillment we got put on film in Network. So the veteran newscaster, Howard Beale, starts telling the truth about the world being messed up. And the whole nation starts listening. He's the mad prophet of the airwaves. His catchphrase is, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." He even starts fomenting the beginning of a revolution with his words, as one night he gets millions of his listeners to go to their own windows and shout themselves in their own towns, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." And they have this epic scene where people are opening their windows all across the country and you could hear, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore," echoing from sea to shining sea. Now, guess what happened in the 50 years since Network came out? That fantasy of someone finally saying what needs to be said became a reality beyond our wildest dreams. In the 1980s, we see the rise of talk radio hosts telling us, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore," as we sat in traffic every day. In the 1990s, we see the rise of cable news talking heads from Tucker Carlson and Rachel Maddow to Jon Stewart and Chris Matthews saying, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." In the 2000s, we are given the power with social media to say, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore" on our very own Facebook walls and Twitter feeds. And by the 2010s, we've got politicians and influencers and YouTubers and streamers of all kinds making careers out of saying, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore," in all the various flavors that every single particular American subculture wants to hear it in. Now today, the whole thing has reached its omega point, where we even have the people in positions of power, the very people who were supposedly the objects of our original ire, build and maintain their power by keeping the drumbeat of "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore" going ad infinitum to their followers. And what has come of our wildest fantasy coming true? Nothing. The revolution did not come. Little progress has been made on the big public problems. The same giant public problems we were mad about in 1976 are still here, only worse and bigger. We're all mad as hell now, but we've never stopped taking it. We love free speech, and we definitely don't want it to be curtailed an inch. But over the past 50 years, we've learned something about freeing more speech, something very important about freeing more speech. Freeing more speech alone does not automatically translate into the outcomes we seek. If real deep truth is lost in the noise of everyone else's supposed truth-telling, freeing more speech alone does not translate into the outcomes we seek. If the truth does break through to us, but we don't have any venue through which to act on that truth, freeing more speech alone does not translate into the outcomes we seek. If the truth is experienced in isolation and we don't think there's anyone else that can experience that truth together with us, freeing more speech alone does not translate into the outcomes we seek. And after a while, if we stop believing anyone will hear us, or anyone will care, or anything will change, or eventually anything matters at all, we won't even want to use our free speech anymore. Freeing more speech alone is really good, but it is not a silver bullet. Now, if I'm saying freeing more speech alone is not enough, then what does it need to be paired with? That is the question tonight. And it's what I'd like to talk to you about. Not just about what free speech needs to be paired with, But what every supposed silver bullet to our big public problems, every promising politician, every promising technology, every promising idea or social trend that comes along needs to be paired with so as to translate into the outcomes that we seek. I am not here primarily to talk doom and gloom, even though I apologize. I've been talking doom and gloom for the whole speech so far, but it's about to change, I promise. I'm here because I don't want, and I'm sure you don't want, our tricentennial to feel like our semi-quincentennial does. I want someone to give the Kegley Institute spring lecture in 2076 right here on the stage about how over the past 50 years we successfully tackled that parade of horribles that I listed above. I want them to talk about how we figured out what was missing from the I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore fantasy. I want them to talk about how we figured out how to reconnect the link between speech and action, between truth and transformation, between good ideas that even seem like they could be silver bullets to our problems, and our problems actually getting solved. So that's the question at hand. What is the missing piece here today? I've been looking everywhere for the answer to this question, and it turns out it's hidden in plain sight. It's hidden in plain sight in that disappointing story above about the silver bullet hype cycle. Let's return to the scene of the crime. Remember how I talked about how our silver bullets have tended to get mixed results, and suddenly you have all these caveats piling up. You know, the silver bullet only works when you have it go together with other things that support it, and if you tinker with it to fit in the specific place. It only works when you have buy-in from the community and when the community really knows how to use it. It only works when there's a trusted leader behind it and when people trust each other to work with it together. It only works when there's a right vibe. It hit me one day. What if we saw those caveats not as excuses for a failed solution, but rather as clues to the missing piece we seek? What if the real silver bullet that solves our problem is not the flashy new thing that's coming from the outside into our various local communities and either working or not working, but rather the boring, old, internal qualities of the local communities themselves? What if we flipped the silver bullet story on its head and said that new ideas, whatever they are, tend to work when they are integrated into a community that has the following: a lot of people taking a lot of different actions, building a lot of different things, tinkering with what works for their particular community. A lot of people participating in this work, learning about how to do this work, growing together into the types of people that do this work well. A lot of people in doing this work together, building relationships with each other, trusting each other more, being trustworthy for each other. What if it's not any particular thing that's going to save us, but everything else? What if it's the whole habitat where things are happening that matters most? Now, this is the time to get way, way, way more concrete, because that was very abstract. With this hunch in mind, that it maybe wasn't the particular ideas, but the whole habitat that gets us the outcomes we want, I started noticing that if you look at times when we've made progress and solved big public problems throughout history, it's not usually some silver bullet idea or singular big brave moment of truth-telling. It's usually some habitat developing to a point where it can activate big moments into big outcomes. So let's take a pivotal example, Rosa Parks. One of the singular moments in the 20th century, she sat down and the world stood up. But if you look under the hood of her story, that's not how it happened at all. If you read Martin Luther King's memoir of the Montgomery bus boycott, it's called Stride Toward Freedom. I highly recommend it, Stride Toward Freedom by Martin Luther King. You'll see that the first few chapters of this memoir of the Montgomery bus boycott are tremendously boring, because all he does is recount all the meetings he attended and groups he was part of in his early days in Montgomery. Literally, he just lists it all out. He lays out all the church committees at his Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, religious education committee. I went to the social service committee. I went to the scholarship committee. I went to the cultural committee. He said he went to 5 to 10 group meetings a week in the first year he was in Montgomery. Why? because there were all these groups in town that had been built up that he needed to meet. The Alabama Council on Human Relations, the Women's Political Union, the Citizens Coordinating Committee, the Bricklayers Union, and all of those groups were eventually the groups whose trust and discipline would sustain the Montgomery bus boycott. And one of those groups was the NAACP, and who was for years a leader on the executive committee of the Montgomery branch of the NAACP, 10 years as secretary of the NAACP Montgomery branch, going to meeting after meeting to build up trust in the community. It was Rosa Parks. Her heroism was not the single spark on the bus. The spark would never have gone anywhere if she and hundreds of others were not gathering tinder for years, developing a community to a point where it was equipped to turn an idea, a spark, into action. The great civil rights leader Ella Baker once wrote a letter back to headquarters at the NAACP saying, quote, I love this letter. It's my favorite quote in the 20th century. I must leave now for one of those small church night meetings, which are usually more exhausting than the immediate returns seem to warrant. But it's all part of the spade work, so be it. It's all part of the spade work, so be it. Spade work, preparing the soil for future action, is the work we never really celebrate, but seems to be at the center of this whole story. And that's just one example from American history. We could list off others. Was the American Revolution that we celebrate this year about the Declaration of Independence or the Boston Tea Party? Or was it 100 years of local civic organizations, Masonic temples, junto clubs, colonial legislatures, committees of correspondence, and local newspapers that laid the groundwork for the revolution and the constitutional order? Did we get gay marriage just because of the lawyers behind the Obergefell decision? Or was it because the organization ACT UP did decades of mutual aid, public health advocacy, and political organizing since the 1980s? Did we get Apple just because Steve Jobs was a genius, or was it because the Bay Area had a homebrew computer club stewarding a local culture of electro-tinkerers in the 1970s? Did we get Detroit just because of Henry Ford, or because the social networks in the neighborhoods of Detroit near Lake Michigan spread engine design know-how from the shipyards to the motor industry? I could go on, but you get the point. What we're overlooking is the habitat. Anything produced by our free speech, any idea, technology, vision, concern, sense that we're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore, needs somewhere to live once it leaves our mouth and enters the world. And the qualities of that somewhere is what determines whether it ever connects to action, change, and eventually all the outcomes we actually want. How should we think about this habitat? And most importantly, how should we think about the work of creating and developing this habitat? If I had to choose a word for this work, the work covered in the caveats, the spade work that Ella Baker talks about, all the slow, long-haul work of incrementally accruing practices and knowledge and relationships and meaning that together make up a place where good things happen, I would call it cultivation. It is the work of creating culture. The great farmer philosopher from Kentucky, Wendell Berry, has a beautiful parable that explains how it all works. He tells the story of how on his grandfather's farm, there was an old bucket hanging on a fence post. It hadn't been moved in years. Over time, spring rain and autumn leaves and winter snow fell into the bucket many times over. Nuts were carried in by squirrels, and mice had eaten the nuts and left the shells. Some of the leaves have rotted, and insects flew in and died, and then birds ate them and scratched into it and left behind a feather or two. And eventually, the bottom of the bucket was filled with several inches of rich soil. What was going on in that bucket, Wendell Berry writes, is the most momentous thing I know. The greatest miracle that I've ever heard of. It is making earth. And out of that earth, amazing things can grow. This is what happens with a stable local community too. Things start falling in over the years. Memories and practices and skills. Stories are collected. Songs are sung. Lore develops. Turns of phrase, rules of thumb, inside jokes among the local community. Fights and the ways we resolved those fights, victories and defeats, and the reasons they happened. Local knowledge, according to Wendell Berry, is remembered or recorded, handed down, pondered, corrected, practiced, and refined over a long time inside a local community. What is the equivalent of the earth that is created by this process? It's culture. Culture is not just food and music, it's something much deeper. I like to think about it in 3 parts. Culture is, first of all, the slow, incremental accrual of practices. All the little solutions to problems for a community as they arise, all the ideas implemented, all the traditions enshrined, all the institutions built, all the little experiments. Second, culture is not just the accrual of things out there, it's also the slow incremental accrual of things inside of all the people who participate in the culture, who are members of it. It's all the people's acculturation to those practices, their knowledge of how to do it, but also their affection for the culture from having experienced and co-created it themselves. And finally, and most importantly, culture is the slow incremental accrual of all the participants' bonds with each other as people who are, and this is a wonderful Berry word, convocated together, who have had parts of their callings, their vocations, weaved together into a shared calling. So 3 parts. Culture is development, new things out there in the community. It's participation, new things in each person. And it's community, new things between each person. And you can see the gifts that come with each of those aspects of participating in cultivating a culture. You participate in a culture and you are filled with purpose about all the things you are making happen. You participate in a culture and you learn and grow as you do those things. You participate in a culture and you make friends with all the other people you're in the culture with, or at the very least, workable relationships with your neighbors. And to bring this full circle, you see how it is the activation agent for any of these silver bullets we think are going to come solve our problems. We say the silver bullet only works when you have it get together with other things that support it, and if you tinker with it to fit in the specific place. Oh, the silver bullet only works if it's part of a broader culture developing many interconnected things at once. We say the silver bullet only works when you have buy-in from the community and when the participants really know how to work with it. Oh, the silver bullet only works if it's in a place where there's a high participation and acculturation among the broad population. We say the silver bullet only works when you have a trusted leader behind it and when the people trust each other to work together with it. Oh, the silver bullet only works if it's part of an interconnected community that trusts each other. We say the silver bullet only works in the right vibe. That's another way of saying the silver bullet only works if there's a living culture being cultivated. We haven't been able to see this because culture is very weird. It's hard to measure. It's squishy. It's slippery. We like analysis that takes things on one at a time, spins them around. We like atomistic engineering thinking rather than holistic ecological thinking. And worst off, culture's associated with reactionary, exclusionary nostalgia. Culture evokes the culture war. But the culture war is funny because it's a culture war where no one is cultivating any culture through it. On one side, you have a group that's talking about culture and the loss of culture all the time, but it's nostalgic for some alleged past culture we may have had. And in that way, I have to say it's quite necrophilic. It's a romance with the dead. And on the other side, you don't have people taking cultivating a shared culture seriously enough, while all the while lamenting all the consequences of not taking cultivation seriously enough. So they're asking, why is there no sense of purpose anymore? Why is there no sense of growth? Why is there no sense of community? Well, that's what happens when you stop cultivating a shared culture together. So it is my argument today that what we need to do to get to the tricentennial of our dreams is to cultivate America. Now, practically, how do we do that? According to Berry, we need more buckets. But what exactly is a bucket? And this is where the social scientist that I've studied over the past 20 years or so, Robert Putnam, comes in, who we made a movie about called Join or Die that some of you may have seen earlier today. But to those of you who haven't, please watch it on Netflix tonight so we can get more viewers than true crime documentaries. But for now, I want to share an episode from his work that illuminates where we might look to answer the question, what exactly is a bucket? See, Putnam's famous for this book called Bowling Alone about the decline of community over the last 50 years. But before that, he was famous in political science circles for this epic 20-year Making Democracy Work study. It was the mid-70s, and Robert Putnam, the political scientist, noticed that there was an incredible natural political science experiment arising in Italy. Because in the mid-70s, Italy decentralized power from Rome to all of its regional governments. There had never been regional governments with power before. It would be as if America only had a federal government and suddenly all the state governments were created in the same year with the same constitutional design. And he said, oh my gosh, this is a perfect political science experiment because I can look at these regional governments over the next 20 years and see which ones succeed and which ones fail. And most importantly, I can find out what is the cause of why some democracies succeed and why some democracies fail. And that's what he did over 20 years in Italy. And he started by finding a way to organize them from most successful regional democracies to least successful regional democracies. This is very hard. He had to poll people about if they liked their democracy. He had to measure if they were having their elections, if they were having stable governments, if people were happy with the politics, if the governments were getting things done. They said they want to build daycare centers and roads. Did they build daycare centers and roads? He measured that all out. And he was able to confidently organize them from the most successful regional government, Emilia-Romagna. Has anyone been to Emilia-Romagna? All the way to the least successful regional government, Basilicata in the south, and all of them in between. But most importantly, he tried to test what makes Emilia-Romagna different than the Basilicatas of Italy. And it turns out it wasn't the economy. It wasn't the design of the governments. They all had similar designs. It wasn't the ideology. They were run by different types of political parties. It wasn't, the quality of the staff. Unfortunately for the professors here, it wasn't necessarily education. What it turned out that made the difference, the thing that was the most significant factor in making democracy work, was that Emilia-Romagna had bocce clubs. Emilia-Romagna had choruses. Emilia-Romagna had a proliferation of local newspapers and congregations and unions and high participation in the political parties and plazas where people talked at night and went in passeggiatas after their dinners together, long walks talking with their neighbors. Emilia-Romagna had more clubs. Now, my takeaway from this work is that associations, from the smallest relationships to the largest organizations, are the buckets. They are the stable vessels of cultivation. Committed relationships to people, places, causes, crafts, institutions are the medium through which culture is built. And the association, the club, the congregation, the union, the party, the organization is the more formal medium through which relationships are built. And if you have a decline in associational life, in committed relational life, in the amount of buckets, you're going to have a decline in cultivation, you're going to have weaker cultures, and you're going to have less of all the good things that come from cultivation and strong cultures. Purpose, depth, community, transformation, joy, your big public problems getting solved. And it turns out that's what we've had over the past 50 years, as documented in Bob's next book, Bowling Alone. We've lost half of our buckets in this country over the last 50 years. The amount of people who attend club meetings, the amount of clubs, the amount of union participation, the amount of congregation participation, the amount of party participation, professional organization participation, even informal relationships like picnics have gone down from the mid-70s, 5 a year, to the 1990s, 2 a year. We've had a huge decline in civic infrastructure, a deforestation of our civic habitat. And with that, we've had the consequences you'd expect. So at this point, it's easy to share what our task at hand is. Our task at hand is to turn this around. We need a proliferation of buckets, an expansion of cultivation, and a mission of rejuvenating America's civic culture. How should we think about this project? The phrase I found most useful is to think about this as a national project of civic development. I take its name from the metaphor of economic development because if economic development is the conscious proliferation of beneficial economic activity, civic development is the conscious proliferation of beneficial civic activity. And here's 4 things I like about using this word. One is it implies a direction. You can be more or less civically developed. You can be underdeveloped. One thing we can say strongly is America is an underdeveloped country civically, and we can learn from more developed countries civically. We can go send delegations to Mexico City or Northern Italy or Quebec, where they have more richer civic cultures, and learn from them. It implies not one binary change, but multiple changes, all of which help piecemeal. So becoming a little more civically developed is good, even if it's not the promised land yet. 3, it implies some sense of taking this indicator seriously. You don't need to be fully quantified, but you can say, if we're going to measure, are we seeing more businesses in the town or not? We could also ask, are we seeing more clubs in the town or not? And most importantly, it's fractal to every level of engagement. You can go to the individual level and say, is an individual civically developed? Is a single person learning how to attend meetings and get along with people and have dialogue across difference and participate in public life? You can go to the club level and ask, is this club civically developed? Is it using best practices of holding meetings and holding press conferences and, electing leadership internally and getting things done? You can go to the town level and build civic infrastructure for the town. Do we have a unified events board? Do we have a civic census where we've gathered info on all the civic organizations in town and listed them in a directory? Do we have joining fairs where people can join the civic life of the town? Do we have dream boards where people can come together and share what clubs they want in the town? Do we have a sense of local history where we research the civic history of the town? Do we have a local newspaper where we report on the town and celebrate the civic life of the town? You can go to the sector level and go through all the professions: public health, urban design, architecture, engineering, law, government, education, anything, business, unions, and ask, how can each of these participate in the project of American civic development? Just like how each of them could participate in the project of sustainability, or each of them could participate in the project of feminism, they also could each participate in the project of community building. And finally, you can go to the national level and you can say, as we're electing leaders and we're supporting national policies, we can put on the lens of civic development and say, does this policy help or hurt the civic development of our country? Now, this is a grand political project, but let's end by taking this down to the individual level. You can start by looking at those 5 levels in terms of what you can do as an individual. As an individual, you can civically develop yourself by joining a club, the ultimate school of democracy. It is the civic gym where you learn how to participate in public life. You can support it at the club level by starting a club or leading a club you're part of. You can join it at the city level by coming together with other people and saying, we're going to civically develop our town by making it easier to start cool community projects in our town. You can go to the sector level and ask yourself, as a professor, as an engineer, as a lawyer, as an administrator in a university, how is our university contributing to community building? And you can support it at a national level by supporting policies and politicians that support this. Now, some of you might say, okay, great, but which things should I join? What should I start? I got all this other stuff I have to do, so this is all easier said than done. I can't decide for you, but I have 2 questions for you to end tonight that might be worth reflecting on. The first question is, what are you doing alone that you could be doing together? Are you eating alone when you could be eating together? Are you entertaining yourself alone when you could be entertaining yourselves together? Are you taking your kids to the playground alone when you could be taking them together with other parents? Are you negotiating your salary or your rent alone when you could be bargaining together? Are you fighting City Hall alone when you could be fighting together, or cleaning up the park alone when you could be cleaning together? Are you grieving alone when you could be grieving together? Are you celebrating alone when you could be celebrating together? What are you doing alone that you could be doing together? That is the question that begins the cultivation process. But that first question is just the initial step. If we all started doing together what we are now doing alone, a lot of good would come. But because we have been isolated for so long, we have been limited in our sense of what needs to be done. Community may take us out of our isolation and begin the work, but we need more than community to rejuvenate this country in the coming century? And that gets to our second and final question. But to get there, I need to enlist the help of two great prophetic voices to end the night, the Polish philosopher Zygmunt Bauman and the radical priest Daniel Berrigan. Starting with Bauman, he has this interesting way of describing how we feel in society today. He says we feel like we are all flying in a plane, and it's pleasant for a while. But we have started to get the creeping feeling that in society today, no one is flying the plane. We find out that the friendly information coming through the loudspeakers has been recorded a long time ago and played on loop. We find out that the airport we're heading to is still in the planning stage and not really a solid destination. We get so scared of this creeping feeling that we storm the cockpit to talk to the pilot about this and discover, yes, there is no pilot flying the plane and everything is on autopilot. And we, of course, don't really trust the autopilot is taking us to anywhere good. This is often how I feel in this moment. I don't know if you feel this way sometimes in the moment, that no one is flying the plane. No one is really in charge. No one is really accountable. Everyone washes their hands of all these big public problems. The CEOs and the deans and the priests and even the presidents talk like they are just as confused and powerless as the rest of us. They are watching TV too, wondering what's going on. There's no point in throwing the bums out because there's no real center of power where you can find the bums to throw out. It's all very disorienting, hard to get a grip on what to do and where to go. And meanwhile, there's some creeping anxiety that if nothing is done, something horrible is looming for our society. What do you do when no one is responsible? Now on to Father Daniel Berrigan to bring us home, and in doing so, get us to the second question we need to ask ourselves. When no one is responsible, Berrigan asserts, you make a choice to do something different than everyone else is doing. You make a choice to take responsibility for something. You take responsibility for a piece of the task of flying the plane. Father Daniel Berrigan found himself in a similar situation to where we find ourselves today because not much has changed. In his case, in his time, everyone was worried about nuclear proliferation and wondering if we were on autopilot headed toward global annihilation. And what Father Berrigan did was he made a choice to take responsibility for stopping it. His form of living that responsibility happened to be breaking into nuclear facilities to try to dismantle the weapons himself. When he and 7 others were arrested and prosecuted, here's what he told the jury. This is from his jury speech in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. You've heard about hammers and blood in this room. These are the hammers of hell. These are the hammers that will break the world to bits. These are the hammers that claim the end of the world. The judge knows it. The prosecutor knows it. We've seen people walk away from these things. We've seen them disclaim them. We've seen them say they are not responsible for them. We've seen all sorts of language circling them like a dance of death. We have been trying to take responsibility for these things. We would like you to know the name of our crime. We would like you to assume responsibility for a world, for children, for the future. And if that is a crime, then it is quite clear that we belong in their jails. I would like to leave with you, friends and jurors. Here it is, the quote. That great and noble word, which is our crime, responsibility. That great and noble word, which is our crime, responsibility. So that is the second question tonight. A dangerous criminal question in our age of calamitous innocence. What am I not taking responsibility for that I could be? And if you mix that with the first question, what am I doing alone that I could be doing together? You get the ultimate question that has saved the world before and will save the world again. The question that has flown the planes to safe landings. The question that has built the habitats. The question that has solved many great public problems in history. What can we take responsibility for? This isn't easy. There are all these things that need to be done in the world, all these problems that need fixing, all these civic habitats that need cultivating. But here's the good news. There's no particular blueprint you have to discern ahead of time for how to do them. The work does not need anything too particularly clever from us. What these problems just need is people to work at them. and you alone don't need to do them all. Wendell Berry said, we live in an age where so many things have fallen apart. But what he says we need to do is this, quote, what you do is you take two things that should be together and put them back together. Two things, not all things. I'd like to end with this poem from Berry that gives me encouragement every time I'm paralyzed by this challenge. It's called February 2nd, 1968. In the dark of the moon, in flying snow, in the dead of winter, war spreading, families dying, the world in danger, I walk the rocky hillside sowing clover. I walk the rocky hillside sowing clover. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's get to work sowing some clover.
Well, thank you so much, Pete,
Thank you.
for your talk tonight. We're going to move into questions from the audience. And, I think I'm going to walk around this mic and bring this to people. We have another one, so maybe we can get one of our student volunteers to come up and take the mic on this side. We can walk around and come to you for questions. So I have not yet gotten to where I need to be for my steps for today. So I think I'm going to do the walking myself. So if you've got a question, raise your hand, and then if we can get, would you hold the microphone from the other side, and then we can walk them around to people? Great, and we'll get to you for questions. I'm going to come this way, and we'll make it there. So I'll go to you first, Quinn, and then we can come around over here.
Great talk. Thank you. I was talking about your film with one of the other lecturers in the philosophy department today, and I just have this question, I guess, that sort of comes from Travis as well. But is group membership, you think, more important than the epistemic norms or moral norms within those groups? I'm just thinking about, some of the other things that you talked about as well.
Yeah, there are bad clubs, and this is a very important fact. I like to be very clear about that. The Ku Klux Klan is a club. It is a bucket that is cultivating culture, really bad culture. Jeffrey Epstein is a social capital extraordinaire, organizing a community and building culture for evil ends. These are, community is not necessarily good. Robert Putnam likes to say social capital is like other forms of capital, like a hammer. You can use it to build a house. You can use it to knock someone over the head and kill them. So community is not enough. And there are bad clubs. However, I'm very moved by Marshall McLuhan's idea that the medium is the message, that the structure of participating in a club itself, this would be like something Alastair McIntyre would also say, like the structure of participating in a club itself cultivates specific virtues that are necessary to achieve anything that we want. So even if I like to, there's like the good clubs versus bad clubs, but I actually really like the spectrum of serious clubs versus super stupid clubs. So let's go to the stupidest club, a pickleball league. Okay. In a pickleball league, I believe a pickleball league is cultivating the future of American democracy. Maybe not as much as like a political party or a local newspaper, but it is going in the same direction because the virtues that are cultivated just by doing anything, working together, creating a public, engaging in relationship with something outside of your house, all of those are the building blocks that will lead us to achieve anything that we want. So even if the whole time you're talking about pickleball, what you'll find surprisingly happens is we've been touring this country. We've had over 550 community screenings of Join or Die, and we get to go to some of them, and people tell us their club stories, and everyone always tells us it as if tells us the exact same thing as if it's like some total strange surprise. But I know that it's not a strange surprise, where they say, I started this club and it's the stupidest knitting club in the world, but then we all said, there's a problem in our neighborhood. And then we became a political organization. And now, you know, we're fighting climate change. And now one of our members is the vice mayor of the town, but it all started in our knitting club. I go, you know, that's not such a surprise to me at all, because you're in the pickleball club and then you notice you want to do it in the parks, but you're mad that the parks aren't getting funded in your town. Or your friend in the pickleball league is someone who's different than you. And that's the first time you have a real relationship with someone who's different than you and you learn about something that's different. Or just the fact that you're out of your house means that you have slowly the seeds are planted that this thing that we're doing together called a town is a thing that I am a member of, as opposed to a space on a map that I bought property or rent property in. And so I really do think there is something about the medium of associational life. It is not enough. I want more good clubs. Keep studying philosophy and ethics, but to make your clubs the most good they can be. But there is something inherent to it themselves. And actually, I'll give an example. There is a really wonderful study on people who attend reactionary in-person organizations end up being more moderate than people who just watch reactionary YouTube videos, because they're literally saying the same thing. They're saying, you know, I'm from the other side of the spectrum. I'll just say, you know, maybe I'll say super reactionary stuff is bad. And they're saying the bad things on the YouTube and they're saying the bad things in the club, but the people in the club statistically end up having more moderate views because they're out in the world engaging with real people. And then they find out that some other member of the club who has some belief that I find odious, maybe it's fine, whatever, they have a grandkid that's slightly different. And that little seed of something is something you're never getting in a YouTuber, you're never getting in a podcaster, but you're getting in the real world with real people. Ivan Illich, the great radical Catholic thinker, said, we need more ministries of the nose, which is we need clubs where we smell each other. You know, like he said, in person, what he was saying was in-person community has something special to it. And so I hope that gets at some of what you were saying.
Thank you, Pete. First of all, I feel more hopeful after your ending, and I have been a member of a club for quite a while that is kind of like that. People coming together who maybe don't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff, but they have a common goal. And we do kind of smell each other, and we get along. But here's my concern. The one part that I was kind of troubled by is the idea that there really is somebody flying the plane, but they're not the people we want flying the plane. They're in control, and they have set up a system to maintain that control. And sure, maybe they'll let us do some of those, put those two things together, or sow some clover, as long as we don't overstep the boundaries and take them out of the cockpit. Yeah. And so that's my concern.
Yeah, I appreciate you raising this. There are, you know, this isn't, sometimes Putnam gets this critique, and sometimes as we tour this film and give this type of talk, we get this critique that, you know, this sounds very hunky-dory. You know, we all join the garden club or whatever. We all join the pickleball league in America Soft. There are really bad folks out there trying to do horrible things with power right now, and have always been. And the thing I just got to say in response to that is, the only way to dislodge power is also through community. If you look at any of the times that we've made a change or grabbed any power back from the powers that be, it doesn't start just with the big giant fight. It starts with the cultivation of the internal community among the people that are going to fight. That's what the word solidarity is, as you know, people who do union organizing, like I know you do. No, you know, one of my heroes, we put her in the film. Her name is Jane McAlevey. She's the late great labor organizing theorist. And she said, you know, she said, you know, I do these union building campaigns where I'd do solidarity building for like 6 years before we even had our strike. And we get to the point where we had like super majority solidarity, where we had 90% of people in the workplace that trusted each other, that had solidarity with each other, that did tests where they tested their trust of each other. She called them structure tests. And then by the time you have that, you have so much power. But it was the 6 years of work that built up to that. And that's the same with neighborhood organizing, general political organizing, or even just organizing to do hunky-dory stuff. Like if you have a lot of trust, you can organize a party very fast. You can do more things on your calendar. You can clean up parks more. So the whole point is just like anything that we want to do to make anything happen in the world requires that internal cultivation. Other questions, thoughts, critiques, things that made you angry, things that made you happy, things that made you think of.
Hi, Pete. I wanted to say thank you for your lecture, first off.
Thank you.
And I guess my question is, you talk about civic reforestation.
Yeah.
Can you tell us how we got here in the first place, or what the civic deforestation is?
Yeah, what I like about what I like about the ecological metaphor is that what civic life is in America is an ecology. It is a ecosystem. Just like, the way to rebuild things is you have to, like when you do ecosystem maintenance or ecosystem, rejuvenation, you have to, do something with the soil. You have to do something with the water. You have to build these trees. You have to reintroduce these frogs. Then the birds come back. The same thing happens. There's a whole study of ecosystem collapse in the natural sciences. So, in ecosystem collapse, there might have been a rainforest somewhere, but then something changed about the air or something changed about the soil, and then erosion patterns are different, and then the bugs are different, the frogs are different, the trees start dying out. The tree was a huge part of something. And then, and then suddenly you're in a desert, 50 years later. And then it's the same thing in reverse. It's the same thing with civics. We have giant civic oaks, like in a town. A local newspaper is a giant civic oak. The public high school is a giant civic oak that's planted. If you have a wonderful library, that's a giant civic oak. If you have a parade every year, that's like a creature that's in the town that does something. Every club is a thing that's contributed to the town and creating more clubs and supporting other clubs. Every cultural practice where there's a, internal language that developed in a town of like a way we say this thing, or a type of food we eat or a type of music we do. That is stuff that's sticking things together. And so the way that I think things collapsed is it's hard to pinpoint the single thing, because ecosystem collapse might have had a first move, but the story of it is not that first move came and then everything was gone. It's that first move came and maybe that knocked down some big oak. Or maybe even it knocked down a small thing, but that led to a chain of events that knocked down a big oak. And so what Putnam says in Bowling Alone, he doesn't definitively say, anything, and he's very careful as like a political scientist not to say it's definitely this, but a big culprit he pointed to was the introduction of television. Because, there was a lot of data to show that, in 1950, most American homes did not have a television. In 1960, most American homes did have a television. In towns where the television was late, we saw civic decline later. Among the people that were watching television more, they were participating in civics less. Today, 10 hours a day are spent with screens, and we think, oh, that's all iPhones. 5 hours on average today are still spent watching television by the average American. So television is still a huge part of the story. And what I think television does, everyone says, okay, what does television do? Well, they say, here's what I think it is. It's taking up all this time. It's entertaining you, and you might have been entertained by going to the club and, or participate in public life. And now you're not doing that. So it's mostly about time. I actually think that's important. But there's another aspect of this. What television does is television tells you that what is happening over there is more important than what's happening in your town. And that psychic aspect, I think, is one of the biggest culprits that we could point to. Because what a local newspaper does, or a local TV station, or a local cultural event where everyone comes together as a town and sees some shared thing together, like a local festival, what it does is you think, what a local newspaper does is it informs us about the town. That's why it helps civic life. I think that's important. It's important to find out in the newspaper that there's a club meeting or an event or a talk or a movie showing or something. But what the most important thing a newspaper does is a religious totem that tells everyone in the town that what you do here is very important. It's so important, we're going to write about it in the newspaper. And we're going to drop that at everyone's house, and they're going to read it. And it is a religious act that we do that tells everyone deep in their souls, my membership in this town matters. And when that's cut, and that was cut by television, and when that's cut by everything on our streams telling us in some town thousands of miles away something is happening, that really does change things. I don't want to say it's not important to know about what's happening at a national level, international level, solidarity with people in far off places, but there's something about putting energy into the internal communities or putting energy into everything else happening everywhere else. And so I think that's a big part of it. I don't know if that was helpful. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for your talk. I also really enjoyed it. And I think I'm going to ask a question that is doing the thing that I hate that philosophers do, but I'm going to do it now, which is to ask a question that from a position that I don't support. But I think there's a version of the story you're telling that has been told in pursuit of aims that you clearly don't have. Like what you just said, I could hear like a America First kind of echo. Yep. And I wonder, I'm trying to suss this out, but I wonder if part of what needs to be talked about here is norms of belonging, because those like civic oaks you just mentioned, sometimes when we talk about the deforestation, we demonize people that we think don't fit our norms of belonging, right? So say, why does our little town not have the culture it used to have? Well, we let all these immigrants in or something. So I wonder how you respond to that, right? Like how do we say we need to recultivate these buckets? We want to have a more localized culture. We want to celebrate the place that we're in. But we need to do that with an ethic of belonging that is very absent from the far right voices that use those same arguments to say, this is why we're in decline.
I appreciate you bringing that up. I think this message is, I think the correct phrase is like transpartisan. It's bipartisan, but it's also like any type of, a lot of people can read themselves into the community story. And I don't want to alienate anyone by like revealing my own personal stuff, but I will reveal my own personal stuff, but not in the spirit of alienating people that disagree with me. I'm a lefty lib, and I am probably the only lefty lib going around the country talking about we need to revive culture, and it's important that like we care to the internal stuff. This is usually talked about from the other side. And I'm very precise in my words when I talk about this, because I always say our goal is to cultivate a shared culture together. And if we want to get really hard dividing line, I really like this phrase from the philosopher Roberto Unger, where he says, our roots lie in the future. I just really love that. Our roots lie in the future. What makes a nation, he says, is a group of people that decide to have shared descendants. Isn't that kind of crazy to think about? Not shared ancestors, not shared land necessarily, but shared descendants. And what he means that is almost symbolically, like what a community is a group of people that come together and decide to have proverbially shared descendants. And what I mean by shared descendants is they decide to make a part of the future together. And so why I went as far as to call nostalgic cultural nostalgia necrophilia is because I really believe it is a romance with the dead. It is not, the goal is not a dead culture that we alleged dead culture that we allegedly had in 1950, doubtful it was even like that, and try to revive it and bring it and force it back. The goal is to have a living culture. And that's why I really like focusing on the future-oriented process of cultivation. You can take a group, when we say we like multiculturalism, what we mean is we say we want a group of people here to all be able to bring themselves into this community and not have to sacrifice too much of themselves to belong in this community. But when I say that we want to cultivate a shared culture together, is that if we want all those people who are coming together to do anything together, they need to at least have part of themselves form something together. They need to be convocated in some way. Even if they just want to form a line to stand in line at the DMV, they have to cultivate the culture of forming a line to stand in line at the DMV. That's a very thin culture we have in America of how to do that. But if you want to make a university together, I've actually liked this trend that we've seen in the war, where in response to the, I would say, like, bad war on DEI, a bunch of communities have said, well, we're going to merge DEI with belonging and community building, because DEI itself is a craft in community building of trying to create. I think the reactionaries who don't like DEI get it totally wrong. DEI is an attempt to do shared cultivation together, to build a sense of shared community together. It's actually about uniting people and having everyone feel like they can be united into a shared campus. But what that is it mixes the multiculturalism of accepting everyone in the past and having them be able to come join this community without sacrificing too much of themselves, but also pairing that with a sense that we also are going to come together a little bit into a shared culture where we don't have to fully melt ourselves down just to be part of a campus or be part of a company or be part of a country, but we want a pluralist democracy. But there needs to be some cultivation if we're going to work together in anything, because what I say cultivation is we're going to do stuff together, we're going to learn how to do it together, and we're going to become friends as we're doing it. And that, if you don't want to do that with someone else, don't do anything together with someone else, because you're going to do that badly with someone else if you don't do that culture building work. So I don't know if that gets at some of that. Yeah.
I think I'm going to insert my own question here, if that's good with you. So I'm thinking about, so I have a colleague who has a coffee mug that says something like, it's too people-y outside. And so, I mean, I think one thing you might say about clubs where you can smell other people is that you can smell other people. And I think setting aside the kind of ways in which you may have, kind of coming at this from a really like right-wing kind of angle, you can think, it's sometimes just really hard to do things with other people because they disagree with you and they have different points of view. And it's a lot easier to like stay at home and like pick the things that I want to watch. And like, maybe I can talk to some chat bot or something that feeds me what I want to get. And in some ways it feels like, okay, so that's like the sugar kind of rush that you get. And what you're telling me is that I need to like eat healthier or something, and I need to get out and it's going to be better for me if I go interact with other people. I say this as someone who's an introvert and who's married to an extrovert. He sometimes nudges me to go do things. Yep. And so, I mean, I think some of that is like, how do we get that kind of nudge to go in a way that like you're telling something, it's going to be better for us, it's going to be better for your community, but no one likes to do what's like better for them.
Everyone who's married today or has a best friend or has a calling that they believe in or are part of some organization that they are part of or have some cause that they're part of, the first meeting sucks. Do you have any siblings? How's the weather? Do they like me? Do I like them? Do I even want to do this again? It's exactly the same. Like dating is exactly the same as joining a club or joining a cause or becoming part of something. It always starts awkward and you have to go through a valley of awkwardness to get to the promised land. The thing that you see with people, though, one of the things that's really awkward about the beginning of joining a club is you see the members who are 10 years in the club, and they're like all chatting with each other, and they're like, hey, Joe, how you doing? Hey, Jose, how you doing? Hey, Linda, how you doing? Like that, but I'm the new person, and no one knows me, and they're like, oh, hello, nice to meet you. It's so awkward, but hidden in that is what happens at the other end of a club. When you join something over time, you become closer to each other. And so we have to just find a way to get through the awkwardness of that. There's this great Tim Kreider quote. He says, if you want the fruits of being loved, you must go through the mortifying ordeal of being known. Oh gosh, the fruits of being loved needs the mortifying ordeal of being known. It's like you have to go out. They got to assess you. They got to look at you. You have to show yourself. That's what vulnerability is. But then at the other end, you get love, and that's what it is. And, I love this phrase from Father James Keenan at Boston College. He has this phrase, mercy is the willingness to enter into the chaos of others mercy. That's what he defines mercy as, the willingness to enter into the chaos of others. And then he says mercy has knit the whole world together. And I think about that. I was like, think about being merciful. It is a tool it is a virtue of community builders. And we all must be merciful. The most serious mercies of like negotiating with people who are totally different than you, who even might be threats to you, all this stuff, like the most hardcore mercifulness to the goofiest mercifulness of like, oh gosh, I got to meet all these people when I could be watching Netflix tonight or something. So all I can say is it's hard, but we got to go through it. The one thing I can say as a consolation prize though is, as we've toured the film, I've been shocked by the amount of club founders that call themselves introverts. They all come up to us and they say, I've got a surprising thing for you. Wouldn't you know it, I'm actually an introvert, and I founded this club that now has 200 people that show up to this event. I go, oh, you're the 100th person who's told me that. It turns out, if you're an introvert, actually founding a club is the best way to do it. And so I finally, after like the 10th person told me this, I said, what do you like about founding a club if you're an introvert? And they said, well, I get to control the design of the social interaction. And so they found a book club, or they found like a club that has really structured design. And so one thing I will just say about this is the design of civic life is a craft that you can design to meet and welcome the needs of your members. So if you have a bunch of introverted members, you can design it in a way to serve introverts, and cultivate them to participate in this way. And we've seen like really incredible book on this is The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. Highly recommend Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. It's all about how to host meetings and design gatherings that make everyone feel welcome, belong, and excited to be there, and less awkward, and go through the valley of awkwardness to get to a fun party by the end. So hope that gets at that.
Yeah. Okay, we can do one more question. You've got the pressure on. Make it a good one.
Yeah, now the most important question at the end. No, it was a very small question, really. Yeah, I like the kind of Neil Postman, amusing ourselves to death as one possible cause for the deforestation. But I'm also interested in the idea that, there are some people out there proposing that we institute some kind of national service program, something akin to kind of the old military draft. And whatever your thoughts about the military draft, I'm happy I came of age after it was ended. But what are your thoughts about that idea?
If you want to have a country where people in Arizona and Maine and Hawaii and Alaska, and people who are rich and people who are poor, people who are Republicans and Democrats, people of all different races and religions, all feel like they're part of some shared project called America, you got to have some national institutions that are a bucket that cultivate people together. What the design of those is and what the upsides and downsides are is up to our creativity. But I definitely think we need, if we don't have that, we will be in trouble. And the times we have had things like that, you see incredible flourishing of civic development. Like after the Civil War, veterans of the Union Army and the people back home, like basically all went home, felt very connected to each other, and founded a bunch of clubs. It led to a lot of cultivation. We have all the studies on the social capital that's built in the military, but it doesn't necessarily need to be mandatory national service. One institution that I just think is totally undervalued in American life, and I think we should 10x, is the summer camp. The summer camp is a thing where you take people from different places and you put them all together, and different subgroups from ideologies to religious groups to ethnicities to specific states have succeeded in taking a summer camp that it takes a part of your life where you take people who are all different and put them through a process, and they come out feeling connected to each other. I don't know why we don't have someone run for president on summer camp for all. We're going to have summer camps where we take, every camp is one person from all the different states or something, and that'll knit the country together. I think there's a lot we can do with that. And that's what you see on a very small level with school integration. The real reason people fought school integration is it was the integration of the community as a whole. If we're going to all care for these kids together in the same bucket, we're going to have to become a we together. And that's the worst thing in the world if we become a we. But I think something that brings kids together is a big thing. And So, it could be national service at that point of transition. I have this friend, Sam Pressler, runs this newsletter called Connective Tissue, highly recommend it. His big theory of how to heal America's community problem is meet people at the points of life transition. So a lot of times people are connected, then they reach 18 and they either go to super connection places like college campuses or the military, or they go off and become very socially isolated. And like that, having an institution that does the opposite of that might be very interesting. Yeah. Thank you for that great question.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you everyone for coming out today. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pete, for being here tonight and for your talk. So we're going to move to the book signing out in the hallway, and I can let you know the students who have books here. So Carson Gildahouse is one. I think that's let's see if I can read. Lisbeth Lanza, Kelly McKenzie, Ashley. My own handwriting is not the best, so I'm trying to read my others' handwriting too. So Grubalis, maybe something like that, and then Julian Caro is the other one. So you can pick up your books in the back, and hope you can join us out in the hallway and talk with Pete. So one more round of applause for Pete. Thank you for being with us tonight. Great. Thank you for being here, and hope you have a good evening.